But
Vulnerability is a very difficult thing to be because it immediately sends a signal to our brain that we are not safe. And we are going to be judged, and we are going to be shunned, and we are going to be kicked out of the group. And it's a very, very scary thing to do. But it is one of the most beautiful expressions of humanity, I think, that we can share with people, is to be vulnerable, express what your story is, express the tears, the joy, the happiness, the sadness, because it gives everybody else the permission to be that as well.
Mm.
I think if
okay,
anything, that's what vulnerability does, is
yep.
it allows you to be open.
So I just looked at what the meaning of it is, and it's capable of being physically and emotionally wounded.
Would you say vulnerability is the same as not caring what people think, or it's deeper than that?
I
think
think it's much deeper than that.
deeper.
Because
Yeah.
I was talking to who was I talking to over the weekend, and I said the one thing I always feel that if I could push on to people is not to care what other people think, so you live the life that you should. But you're saying go deeper.
Yes.
Yes. So when we start talking about vulnerability and sharing, and both of you beautiful ladies have thanked me for being vulnerable about my move that we've talked about in previous episodes, and even my cancer last year when we talked about that. And that it took a lot to share it internally, and I felt I was in a safe place to be vulnerable. And I think there is a difference between not giving a damn what people think and being yourself, because when you don't give a damn, you stop being a people pleaser. You're
Right.
not trying to please everybody. But to me, there's also a difference with vulnerability, that I don't walk around and just vomit out my feelings to whoever's going to listen to me, because then it just isn't the same. So I think when you feel that comfortable, even though it's scary, to be vulnerable about your feelings, because you don't know the reaction you're going to get from it, that is such a brave thing to be able to accomplish, that it actually helps to heal you.
But not just your feelings, your opinions too, right?
Sure. Yes.
Right? Like
Yes.
like so you're being vulnerable across the board.
Yes. Yeah.
You're showing you.
Yeah, you're opening yourself up, and I think that's the other thing, is that you cannot give a hoot about what people think about you and not be vulnerable.
Yes.
Like, I can say I don't really care what anybody thinks of me, but I don't necessarily have to share anything either. I don't have to put myself in a vulnerable spot to also not care what anybody thinks of me and go ahead and live my best life.
That's right.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay. I think I'm that.
Yes. Yes. I think,
But I don't think I'm going to tell you too much.
but
Yeah.
I think as we've built our relationships, we have been more vulnerable with each other.
Mhm.
And
You're
even
talking us three? Us three?
yes.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Even within this show,
Mhm.
because I think in order to be vulnerable, you have to have some form of trust of where you are, some form.
Yeah.
But isn't that, but we have created a safe space for the three of us, right? Like, I mean, I know for me, sometimes I feel like I'm just having a conversation and I forget that this is going to be shown,
Yeah.
like viewed by
Right.
whoever's going to view it.
Yeah.
And I forget that, and it does feel very safe to share and whatever. But I think that safety also has to come within yourself.
True.
To
Yep.
be able to say, I have my own back in this, but I am going to share something, or I'm going to share an experience or whatever that has left you raw.
Do you think part of being vulnerable is because you want to help others to understand not what you've been through? Maybe they're not alone, or
The connection? Like,
maybe it's a connection. It can be a connection. It can be a purpose. It can be a way of allowing someone to see inside your soul, to understand you a little bit better.
crap out of me. You ain't looking at my soul. You just stay back.
You know what, more than anything, I really, like I said before, I really believe that vulnerability, when we are vulnerable, it allows people to look into themselves. Not so much that they're looking. I think that is our whole worry. Oh my God, someone's looking at me, right? And we're like paranoid about what that represents. We have a story. But I think what actually happens is that when someone has been very vulnerable and open and raw with you, and in their emotional state, and whatever it is that they are sharing, we turn inward. We turn inward into what our experiences are, what our emotions are. And it gives us that possibility that maybe we can open that door as well. And that we can let some of this stuff out, right? Because it is in that expression that we give permission to other people to be the same. And really, our emotions collectively as humans, we all have the same emotions. We all share the same stuff. Our stories are different in how we've arrived at that emotional state, but the emotion is still the same. We all feel happy, joy, mad, sad, grief, all of that. We all feel that at some point in our lives. And I think it's when we can express that, it allows that window to be open for somebody else to go, I'm not alone. I also feel that. I felt that. Thank God I'm not alone. Thank God this isn't just a one personal experience that belongs to me and me only, and somehow I'm weird because I feel that way, right? I think that's what vulnerability allows people to have.
But there's levels of it.
Oh, sure, there's levels
Right?
of it.
Like
Yeah,
there's
sure. Just like there's levels of emotions, there's levels of happiness, and there's levels of grief, and there's like it's a wave, right? It's exactly, and that safety point is going to kick in at some point that says, I'm not saying anymore. I'm not going to share any more of this experience. I've gone deep enough.
Right.
And that's okay too. Right?
But what if it's being turned against you? So you are trying to be the better person every day, trying to grow as a person, and you start to allow where you feel is safe places, and you start to allow yourself to open up, try that connection, and it gets turned on you. What do you do then? What do you do then? Huh?
Well, that's on them. That's not on me.
I know, but you still have to deal with it. It is on them. But so I open up to you, lovely ladies, and then you just like stab me. What do I do? How do I get through that and allow other people, allow myself to find other safe spaces? So what do we do if it's being turned on us?
That becomes part of that journey though, right? It's like, okay, now it becomes part of that journey of that expression of whatever vulnerability it was that you were willing to open up. If I'm going to turn around and backstab you with that, then I have now created hurt and pain for you. But that doesn't mean you have to close off. It just means that is something else that is shared. I did this and this is what happened as a result of this. And not like, oh, feel sorry for me, this is what happened, but like, yeah, this is a risk. Humanity, living every day, loving every day is a risk.
Right. We talk about everything that we've gone through in our lives, even starting our businesses. Everything that you do for growth is a risk.
Yeah.
Every single thing we do is a risk. being vulnerable is a risk, but it allows people to see who you really are and what makes you who you are. Because it is all of our experiences, our happiness, our sadness, our trials, our tribulations, everything that has molded you each day to be the person you are and the person you're trying to be every day.
Yeah.
Which goes back to what Tracy says, though, that then you're kind of looking inside. So now I'm going, oh my God, I'm going to show who I am. I don't really know who I am, or I don't, maybe there's things about me I don't like, right?
But that's okay.
That's
okay.
Perfect. That's humanity, right? That is all of us on a human level. And how awesome is it, especially when you have somebody who you really admire and you really think, man, that person's got their stuff together and like, you know, whatever. And they share something that is very human. And you're like, wow, like, I didn't know
You don't have your shit together.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't realize that that was still like, you know, you're still hanging on to your nonsense or whatever it is, right? It's like we sometimes view people through a lens that's not correct, and we end up, you know, putting these people into a box that they don't really fit into. And it's really nice when those walls get broken down and you're like, oh, you know what? You're not really that much different than me.
Yeah.
We're
And then
really kind of the same.
And on the flip side with social media, and that you can really portray yourself as this particular person without being vulnerable.
I mean, how many times have we heard about social media influencers who appear to have their entire lives put together and then they end up taking their own life?
Yes.
Because they're so unhappy, they're so alone.
Yep.
Like, I don't know, vulnerability for me is just a beautiful expression of sharing that gives me hope because I'm sharing it. And hopefully it does the same for the person receiving it.
Okay, well, say I wanted to try this vulnerability crap. What would I do? So I don't care anymore what anyone thinks. I've got that covered. Now I want to maybe allow a little bit more out there.
So you can, like, when I think of vulnerability, there's like, as we were talking about before, there's layers of it.
Yeah. See, wasn't I being vulnerable right there?
Yes, you were. So it's kind of like we just talked about social media, like for myself or for anybody, when we're showing our lives or we're doing our business or we're doing whatever, making a mistake. That's making a mistake on social media is like, you can be ridiculed really bad, but not saying, yeah, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
We've all made mistakes. That's being vulnerable, not trying to cover up the mistake. Showing the imperfect parts of your life, if you're a social media influencer or whatever, or expressing your feelings like I have recently about my emotions on my move. That is being vulnerable. You start small, even if it's with somebody who's a really good friend that you feel safe with, like a one-on-one, instead of broadcasting it out to the world and saying, you know, I really need to talk to somebody. I want to let you, you know, whatever it is, and have that conversation. And it's like anything else, it takes time and it takes practice. Because it's not, to me, vulnerability isn't everybody you see that you just vomit out your life and everything you're going through. Because there has to feel you have to feel safe around. Some people really aren't going to give a damn what you're talking about. Like when I'm working at the restaurant, everybody I talk to, I would say, wow, did you know I have to give everything away? And I don't know what to do with my grandmother's vase, and start crying. I don't do that. That's like, no offense, the patrons would be like, who is this person? Like, why is she talking to me this way? This is my viewpoint on this. But there are people where I am extremely, like, I can be totally, I've built this trust to be vulnerable with. and I can talk about anything with them and
To
be,
me, to be vulnerable is to have a very difficult conversation that you find hard to even have with yourself, to have with somebody else. That's when I'm laying it all on the line.
Mhm.
Like for me, grief is a very difficult conversation to talk about, very hard. So I tend to avoid it. I don't, it's like, oh, I don't want to go there. That's raw. But what would that do for somebody else if I was able to be that raw with them and they had experienced something similar?
Yeah.
what came to mind? You think the grief, I think you're traveling. When you talk about the anxiety that you suffer when you travel after COVID. To me, you were extremely, you let in people seeing the side of you.
Yeah.
That's because you're a very strong woman.
Yeah.
And you're now allowing somebody to see that getting on a plane can cripple you. Or being in a large crowd from after the pandemic can cripple you, can send you into a phase of.
And you know what's really interesting about that is that in the pandemic, I wouldn't have been able to talk about not being able to go out at all. I denied that, denied it. It was just like, oh no, this is just what's happening. I'm busy. I got too much to do. Dave goes out and does all the shopping. It's fine. I couldn't have done it. It was only because I was absolutely forced into doing it that I just thought, I know I'm not the only person that feels this way. I know that for an absolute fact because I had, lots of conversations with people who felt very crippled about the pandemic. And so I looked at that opportunity as a way to be able to maybe share something that could help somebody, but I didn't feel vulnerable in doing that.
Right.
So that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So I think it also depends on what that emotion is that allows for that feeling of safety, right? Allows for that feeling of I'm going to be okay here. If I share this information, I know I'm going to be okay.
Yeah. And you also knew that somebody else needed to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean,
yeah, but she would have known that someone needed to hear it while she was in it and she didn't feel safe.
Right.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, even being able just to, because you know what, I hadn't dealt with it. I think that's one of the bigger things is that it's like, okay, I'm in the middle of this and I can't go out of my house. Like, I don't want to be with anybody other than I had like 4 people in my world, and that was the only 4 people I ever wanted to deal with. And I kept telling myself that wasn't really true. So I didn't, that was hard to come face to face with, that I actually have a problem here. I actually have a problem. That was really difficult for me to, stand in the mirror and go, you got an issue here and you need to fix it.
But once you did that and had that conversation with yourself, you released it in a sense and were able to be vulnerable now. Is that correct?
No, I acknowledged that I had a problem long before I did the travels, to be honest with you. I acknowledged that I had an issue, but I wasn't prepared to do anything about it, which is, not the greatest, but I wasn't. I was just like, you know what? I don't know how to fix this.
Right.
And the obvious thing just wasn't obvious to me. Like, just get out there and like be with people and know that, you've got a mask on, you're okay. Like, it's like, you know how to take care of yourself. None of that was obvious. And it only became obvious when I had to force myself into, okay, like, here's the reality. Like you're going on this trip.
Right.
Like, you can't not go on this trip. So, and I'm thankful to myself for realizing that months in advance to start the work that I needed to do to be prepared for that event. right? And I did that by figuring out what my tools were, what's going to work well for me, what I know I could draw upon very quickly to help myself in that situation, and then started to go out to do grocery shopping. I was like, okay, Dave, you and me will go out. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to just go out on my own. And yeah, I mean, I know it probably sounds ridiculous to anybody listening to this, but that's where I was. That's exactly where I was.
I don't think we should put this sounds ridiculous in a statement,
No, you're
because
right.
somebody having any form of anxiety, to them, it's
Mhm.
very coming from a person who has suffered and still suffers at times from anxiety.
Mhm.
When you start to feel that this is ridiculous, it's like you're just pushing off your feelings, where that's not a good thing either. So
Which we do when we are anxious, right? That's
yes,
exactly what we try to do,
yes.
is to shove it to one side and go, I don't need to deal with it. I guess that comment actually stems from the fact that for someone who does not experience anxiety, or someone who does not feel anxious, the way somebody responds to something can seem to them illogical. It's like, I don't understand why you're feeling this or why you're experiencing this. That's, I guess, really at the heart of that
Okay.
comment.
Yeah.
But you're right, it is not ridiculous at all.
No.
Whatever it is that you're experiencing, it's yours, and it's valid, and it needs to be acknowledged.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's huge, is that it's valid, whether anyone else agrees with it or not, it's valid. And that you need to hold on to. Because I've had conversations in the past where my feelings were just whatever, Tracy. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. These are my feelings. You might not understand them, but they're mine. So shut up.
Yeah. And you see, that chips away at that ability to be vulnerable, to be discounted, and to be like, oh, well, whatever, like, we don't care about what you think. Like that chips away at that ability to share from the heart and risk being vulnerable with somebody else.
Yep. So I'm going to ask our viewer a question. When was the last time you were vulnerable? And how did it go? Comment below. Let us know. We would love to hear from you and love to hear your story. And also, don't forget to hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit notifications so you know every Wednesday when our new episode is out. And don't forget, be vulnerable today. Have a good day.
Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you as a regular member of our community.